All right, guys, I just want to welcome back to Everything College Football Podcast. Today, me and Nick here will be doing our 2024 preview and prediction on the Maryland Terrapins. Coaching staff consists of Mike Locksley, who's done very good over the last 3 years. Combined record sits at 29-33 through 5 seasons. Offensive coordinator, still an interesting duo here of Kevin Sumlin and Josh Gaddis, second year each in this role for those two. Azar Abdul-Rahmi and Brian Williams will split defensive coordinator duties. And then again, 3 straight winning seasons. They played Ohio State and Michigan very hard last year. And they've had 7 players drafted over the last 2 seasons. So I think Locksley's doing a pretty impressive job here for Maryland. Looking at this offense, he's going to have to do another one, Nick. This is a unit that has a lot of turnover. They only returned 4 starters. They added 5 guys in the portal. They lost 6. They returned 6 of their top 8 pass catchers, don't I think that's going to be the starting point for this offense, Nick, is, Caden Prather, a legit vertical threat, uses his frame to be effective on contested catches. Smooth route runner with some strong hands at 6'4", 211. I like Ty Felton. He proved to be a reliable pass catcher. Could win downfield despite limited space. He was using the quick game often, slants and curls frequently. Did have 3 drops and 3 fumbles. Did work on that. Solid movement on initial moves to get a few extra yards. Not great yak, though. You look at some of the depth they have at wide receiver. Braden Wisłowski will step into a starting role. Had a nice kick return touchdown last year, showcasing his explosiveness. Octavian Smith enters his 3rd year. He should continue to be able to, hopefully significantly improve his play. Has versatility, but at 5'11", 174, seems best suited for the slot. Salik Knotts, another 3rd-year guy that I hope will see the field more. Outside of the top 2 wide receivers, if Prather and Felton, the group kind of seems lackluster, Nick, and obviously losing Talia Tagovailoa and turning the 2 quarterbacks we'll talk about in a minute that really seem kind of limited from a passing perspective. What do you think these guys can generate for them?
This is an offense that has some solid players in this wide receiver room, but they also do lose some talent. They do have a lot of rotational pieces that really need to step up. I think Prather is a really solid player to return 666 yards receiving last year. 15.9 yards per grab, that is, and 5 touchdowns for him. Ty Felton, really solid player, 723 yards receiving last year, 15.1 yards per grab, and 6 scores for him. Really good numbers for those two. You're looking at 11 touchdowns right there between the two, plus 1,500 yards receiving. Good numbers to return, certainly. Octavian Smith, I like him a lot. 209 yards receiving, unlimited grabs, and 1 score for him. But the quarterback play is going to worry me. We're going to talk about that in a second. This room has some solid pieces, some rotational depth pieces. Wilecki should be all right in the slot. Didn't have any catches last year, but was solid in special teams. He's going to get up and be a starter this year as a sophomore. Can he step up and be solid in the slot? I do like I do trust the coaching here, but I'm just concerned about the quarterback.
Yeah, you look at Billy Edwards. He was mainly used in the run game, had 7 touchdowns, 3 of those coming against Michigan. 6 of them coming over the last 3 games of the year. So I really didn't use him until, I guess, goal line situations late in the season. Mainly he's been a short yardage guy. Went 6 of 20 throwing the ball versus Auburn in the bowl game. That's just not very good. MJ Morris started 4 games for NC State. Showcased some good intermediate velocity, has patience, the ability to get over the defense with his good range on the throws. Needs to show better ability of seeing the field, though. Only completed 55% of his balls. And like you said, Nick, there's a lot of good coaching here. They also have Cameron Edge in the room. Right now, who's going to be a starter? It's a complete toss-up, it seems to me. I think that Morris will probably maybe have an edge, but Edwards has been in the program longer, so that leads me to think that he would get that nod just because of the familiarity. This quarterback room, though, does not seem to be all that great, and they had a quarterback in Talia who was fairly a good player, but he never really seemed to improve over his couple of seasons there for the Terrapins. What do you think of this quarterback room? Do you think the coaching can uplift it?
This quarterback room's in a major issue right now. Talia Tagovailoa, he ends up going to the CFL, signing with the Hamilton Tiger Cats in Hamilton, Ontario. That's where he ended up. He had 11 picks last year, struggled at times despite 3,300 yards passing and 25 touchdowns, plus a nice comp rate. But now you replace him, it really is a complete toss-up and a mess. I think Edwards could potentially be okay, but he's been more of a running back. Is he going to be able to complete passes at a high clip? MJ Morris, what is he going to look like coming over as a transfer? He has some good experience as a true freshman. Can he be a solid player, as a retro freshman, that is? Can he be a solid player? Younger player, Cameron Edge, he's a younger player as well, but doesn't really have enough meaningful starts for him. He only threw a couple passes last year. Same thing with Edwards, only threw 30 passes total across 8 games. Did have the 7 rushing touchdowns, so that kind of adds to his appeal. He could be kind of a fun, different option for this offense, but in general, I'd be concerned about this quarterback room. I think it's really lacking any sort of talent and depth, and it really has a lot of question marks.
Now, Edwards did have a nice passing touchdown against Michigan in 22. played a good bit. I think he started the entire game against Northwestern that same year. But other than that, he was solid in 22, I guess, as a passer, but not much on him either. I assume he'll probably just end up being the starter, though. The running back room, it's not great, even though Roman Hemby is a phenomenal player, home run hitter with great burst, has an extra gear, a valuable pass catcher. Slashing style of runner with his good vision at 6'2", 202 pounds. He's shown great ball security as well. Needs to improve his creativity, though. Didn't showcase as much explosiveness this past season. Colby McDonald, has been a purely rotational piece in his career. Nolan Ray got on the field for a few touches as a freshman, but not much, though. 4-star from Baltimore, DeJohn Williams may be forced into action, and what's just a thin running back group for them. Hemby's great, Nick, but he can't carry the complete load. A guy who's had, a pretty successful start to his career. What do you make of the rest of the unit, though?
Hemby is a really solid player, a really good leader for this running back room. I do like him a lot, but how much of the load can he carry? 680 yards on the ground for him last year, 4.8 yards for carry, and 4 touchdowns. The rest of the room is a little shallow, and there's just not enough depth, in my opinion. Colton McDonald could be solid. He had 306 yards on the ground and 2 scores last year. I worry about this running back room. I worry about this offense. I think quarterback play is very weak as well. And it really does bring me some questions. Can this offense be able to produce this year? Are they going to be able to find a way to get points in these games? They scored 29.7 points per game last year. I don't know if they'll be able to get to that number again this year.
Even harder when the offensive line, they replaced 4 starters up front. Both tackles, Delmar Glaze and Gottlieb Adezi were very good for them. Those guys are gone. Alan Heron played 62 snaps at right tackle for Short University last year. That's one of the auditions they got. Andre Roy had even less snaps than that. Enters his 3rd season with the program. Right tackle Connor Fagan played a good bit, but was horrid. Kevin Kaljani played a little bit, but not much. Focusing on the interior offensive line, though, left guard Kyle Long, the lone starter that's back, was pretty poor as a pass blocker. Josh Katlenberger, 600 snaps in 3 years at Purdue. Wasn't anything special for them, but has good versatility. He can play anywhere on the O-line. Aloy Ma played 13 snaps for Georgia at 6'5", 333, an ex-3-star out of AMG Academy. Pretty encouraging addition right there, Nick. Marcus Dummerville barely played last year after transferring in from LSU. They expected him to be a big part of the O-line. Really just seems to be a depth piece at this point. 6'5", 310, a player who has seen time at 3 different positions, though. Ba from Georgia, I think that's a really encouraging add, and I think, Katlenberger could be something for them, and I think Long will probably improve. The rest of the unit, though, it just seems to be kind of a makeshift unit. Going to Short University to get a guy who's barely played is kind of an interesting move.
Ba could be a really solid player at right guard, has some experience, didn't play a whole lot at UGA, but is still a really good player to add good experience out of high school, right? Played 13 snaps at UGA, but big size, 6'5", 333, out of IMG Academy, pretty solid player. Grabbing in some other interesting pieces here out of the portal that really could be, potentially okay, but not really guys you want to be grabbing in a Big Ten program. Kattenberger, really solid ad, but is he going to be able to live up to that full potential at center? Kyle Long, is he going to be better this year? Kyle Fagan, is he going to be better this year as well? Some nice rotational depth pieces, but overall this offensive line, that does worry me.
Look at the verdict for this unit. The Terps offense seems to be at a low point, despite having 2 good wide receivers and, a star running back. The O-line is quite depleted. The QB room seems to have some shaky options from a pure passing standpoint. And, the depth all around is relatively unproven. There's enough offensive minds here in the fold to be able to get this group to click, though, is the good news. Likely a 2 QB system early on is the approach from me, but having, someone, Gaddis and Loxley, Nick, these are enough cooks in the kitchen to make things happen, especially with the defense is going to play as good as I expect it to. What's your opinion on that? Even though, there's a lot of concerning factors, there's some good coaches here.
I do like this coaching staff to kind of be able to lead this offense through this issue. Mike Loxley previously was offense coordinator at Alabama under Nick Saban, has been the head coach for a couple of years now, has good experience. Kevin Summerlin was a head coach at A&M as well as Arizona. Josh Gaddis has some good experience returning with him as well. So these are 3 guys that have head coaching experience in the past and good experience at different programs in college football. So that certainly does make me feel a little bit better that they'll be able to get more out of what is overall a weak offensive room when you look at it on paper.
Look at the defensive side of the ball. That played very well last season, 40th in points per game allowed, top 40 in all categories across the board. The only ad was an important one. We'll get to him on this side of the ball. Lost 8 players. They returned 6 starters. Do get back 4 of the top 6 tacklers. Defensive line, formidable group on the D-line in terms of starters. Quayshawn Fuller was a solid pass rusher, playing pretty good snaps for them. Jordan Phillips, last year's transfer from Tennessee, was really good for them, especially against the run. Tommy Aikens-Basodi at 6'5", 315 was a consistent disruptor. Isaac Bunyan played 200 snaps. Tazee Johnson wasn't all that good, but saw plenty of time. This is a pretty solid defensive line here with some veterans and some depth. They were 89th in tackles for loss, but they were 29th in sacks, Nick. And, this defensive line obviously helped force 24 turnovers, which is 13th in FBS. No real standouts. Maybe Phillips will probably compete for all conference honors here. But overall, this is a starting trio that all played a lot of snaps last year, and I think they're going to improve this year.
There are some solid players here that I think could really step up and be good for this team. Phillips, I like him, 28 total tackles, 1.5 tackles for loss for him. Tommy Akimboste as well. He was a solid player, 28 total tackles, 1 tackle for loss, 1 sack, 2 pass breakups for him. Decent numbers, Keshawn Fuller, 25 total tackles, 5 tackles for loss, and 3 sacks for him. So good numbers to return there. I think these 3 guys up here at defensive end, nose tackle, and defensive tackle, all 3 of them are solid players. They got some good experience last year, some solid reps under their belt. I like to see all 3 of them improve this year.
Middle of the defense, the loss of Jayshawn Barham at middle linebacker of the Michigan isn't ideal, but they return a strong group around him, despite the loss of him, that is. Donnell Brown was a very good weak side linebacker who was strong in coverage and was able to create some good negative plays. Fanaje Gote was quite sound and should really emerge in the middle. Ruben Hypolite will be alongside him. Was a strong tackler, and he's improving the other areas of his game. But he was still a very impactful player. Kellen Wyatt played a lot last season. He ended up leading the team in tackles for loss and sacks. Caleb Wheatland was behind in both of those figures, and he's going to occupy likely a backup inside linebacking spot. This is another solid part of the defense with experience. Again, no one's going to blow you, off the waters when it comes to, an NFL draft scouting tape or anything like that. But a lot of experience here. They have depth, and they had guys that produced last season coming back, Nick. Again, very hopeful for what this front seven could possibly provide.
I like Hype a lot. A lot of things. A really solid player. 66 total tackles, 2.5 tackles for loss, and a sack. Top returning tackler for this team. Fanaje Gote is a really good player as well. 44 total tackles, 4.5 tackles for loss, 2.5 sacks for him, plus a pick. Decent numbers there. Donald Brown, a really solid linebacker. 2 picks for him, 29 total tackles, 4.5 tackles for loss, 3 sacks there. Decent numbers. Kalen Wyatt, returning him as well. He was really solid. 6.5 tackles for loss, 4.5 sacks, plus 34 total tackles overall. Some good numbers top to bottom. I like this linebacker unit. I think there's some solid rotational pieces here, some solid depth as well with Michael Harris, Caleb Wheatland, and Daniel Wingate. Really solid players. This is the best part of this defense, in my opinion. A really solid middle of this defense.
And looking at the secondary, they returned Dante Trader, who has been a good free safety starter the past 2 seasons. Glendon Miller was an exceptional defender in his nickel role and should anchor it again this season. The lone addition I alluded to, Jaden Husky from Bowling Green. He was a great corner for them. 4 picks, 6 pass breakups. It's a very important player they're able to add. Rest of the unit made up of limited snaps. Rex Fleming saw a tad bit of time. He's in a battle with Alex Moore for a starting strong safety role. Lionel Whitaker wasn't all that bad in his snaps. And also the sophomore Kevis Thomas, who's going to contend for a starting cornerback role. Depth's a little bit unproven here. A lot of young players. These guys have some big responsibilities. There's some big departures here from this back end. This is a secondary that was never bad. They only gave up 300 yards only once. That was Ohio State in a game they played very well in. So I think this is a secondary that will probably regress a little bit, but I don't think it's going to probably cause them any games. I don't see them giving up 400 by any means.
I think this is a secondary unit that's sturdy but steady, a solid unit. Dante Trader, 53 total tackles, 6 pass breakups, and 2 picks for him. Solid numbers. Glendon Miller, 37 total tackles, 4 picks for him, plus a touchdown, and pick 6 in that, and 5 pass breakups. Rex Fleming, 15 total tackles for him as well. Another solid depth rotational piece. They added a really good player in Jalen Husky from Bowling Green, who could be a really solid, great starter from day one at left cornerback. A nice jump up in competition for him. Solid player overall. This was a good unit against the pass, right? They weren't incredible, but top 40, 208 yards per game. I think they can be around that same number this year. I think they're going to be solid against the pass.
And this is a defense that I think, didn't get a lot of credit last year. They were very good. They only gave up over 400 yards once. That was the Penn State. Again, they got absolutely hammered in. Other than that, though, they played very good against Michigan. Only 291 yards in that one. Ohio State held them to 62 rushing yards. This is a unit that played very solid last season. Obviously, they didn't play the strongest of offenses by any means, but I just listed 2 of them right there. They were playoff caliber opponents, and one was the national championship team. I hadn't seen Michigan flustered that much all season long, Nick. They had McCarthy in flux. The rushing attack struggled. They put up a resilient effort against the Wolverines late in the year in a game a lot of people thought that they should have won.
This is a team that can step up on defense against the big opponents, like you're alluding to against that Michigan team. They looked good as well earlier in the year against Ohio State. They play them very hard the last couple of seasons. This is a tough team to beat. Maryland has a very good, consistent defense, and while we're going to talk about the record in a minute here, and we don't have an incredible record for this team, they are going to be in a lot of these close games that they could potentially lose.
Yeah, Maryland, they just don't seem to ever show up against Penn State. But the other teams they really have shown up against in the last couple of seasons. And that leads me to the verdict here. The Terps quietly have an impressive defense with good talent at all levels, including great experience in the front seven. Played very well versus those elite offenses last year. Not many of these guys will play on Sundays, but they're collectively an impressive group that used high energy to create for the offense. If they can find more negative plays in terms of tackles for loss, they could mold into a pretty dangerous unit, leading us to the final prediction. Maryland, it's an interesting bunch, as this defense is a really good unit, while on the other hand, the offense is only, a proven running back matched with a few talented pass catchers. You're going to have, a quarterback and an offensive line to assist them is going to be the question mark. I doubt it. At this point, though, with all the cooks in the kitchen, they should be able to muster up enough offense to compete, against some of the lower tier teams. I think this is a defense that's not just going to carry. I think in games like Indiana, Northwestern, Rutgers, Minnesota, they can muster up enough offense, Nick. Even against MSU and Virginia, they should be able to compete, I would say, with these coaches. Problem is, the program hasn't had a signature win in forever. Ohio State owns the series 9-0. Michigan is 11-1. 43-3. Penn State owns them. I doubt they have the offense to snag one this year. Good team. They're going to struggle to fight for a bowl. They're going to play hard, and I think at the end of the day, they'll ultimately end up with that with a 6-6 record. You're going to go with 7-5. I think the postseason is inevitable. A big win this year, Nick, is not going to happen.
I like this team to make the postseason. I think I'm 7-5. I have them beating Minnesota as the one win that you and I differ from. This is a team that's been consistently in bowl games the last 3 years. They've won 3 bowl games in a row, which is an impressive mark to do. Not a lot of teams can say that they've done that. They won the Music City Bowl last year, absolutely dominating Auburn, and then previously won the Duke's Mayo Bowl and the Pinstripe Bowl as well against some solid opposition. So this is a team that Mike Locksley coaches to get to the postseason. I do believe they will get there again this year. I worry about the quarterback room. I think it's going to be a big downfall for this team. I question that. I worry about the running back room, the lack of depth there, the offensive line as well, some interesting pieces there. I like the wide receiving room. I think the front part of this defense is solid. I think the secondary is solid as well. I like the defense to be a top 40 unit in college football again as well. Maryland, kind of just a middle of the road, boring team. I hate to use the term boring, but they are a boring team. They don't beat the big dogs, and they just kind of go quietly about their schedule. They beat the teams they're supposed to. They lose to the teams they're supposed to on paper, and they end up with a solid record and get into a bowl game and end up winning a bowl game. A sure bet when you're picking your bowl games in Bowl Mania. But outside of that, this Maryland team is just going to be middle of the road, pretty much average unit.
We usually don't talk about individual rivalries when we do these previews of certain teams. But today I think that's important. Again, the Penn State thing I alluded to, Nick, there's something about this team they just cannot get over. I mean, last year 51-15, 30-0 before that. They were able to win in the COVID year, kind of a scratch there. Before that, it was a 35-point loss, a 59-point loss, and a 63-point loss. Something about Penn State, man, they just run through this team. And that's, at the end of the year, I think, it's not going to be any better for them when they play the Nittany Lions.
It is a weird kind of thing for this team to struggle to get over the hump. They played Penn State a lot in their history, and they just lose a lot to them like you're alluding to. I don't really get it either. Penn State seems to just absolute dominate them. Can't quite figure out why exactly. I don't think they're going to win this year against Penn State on the road. It's a tough place to play, very tough environment. Tough look from Maryland. Can they figure it out and get a win against Penn State soon? I hope for the sake of the program.
That's going to be it for today's episode. As always, Nick, appreciate joining me. Talking a solid team, a quiet team, like you said, a boring one, but one that I think is actually pretty sound. And again, when it comes to Bowl Mania, usually a surefire.
Certainly a team worth watching and a team to pick in Bowl Mania when it gets to that time of the year. Mike Locksley is a great head coach. I think he's a really solid leader for this program.
Make sure you guys like, comment, subscribe. See you next